I knew something shady was going on the third morning I found my outdoor outlet cover hanging open. I'm Vincent Meyers, 38, electrician by trade, homeowner by war. And this war, it started with a Tesla, not mine. Hers. Her name's Sharon Greenfield, HOA president, professional busybody, and the kind of middle-aged woman who thinks, have you read the bylaws? Is a personality trait. She's got the blonde bob, the oversized sunglasses, and a voice that could peel paint off the walls, and she loves her Tesla. Problem is, Sharon's house is 2 lots down, no driveway charger, but me. I've got a corner lot and an outdoor GFCI outlet near the sidewalk. You do the math, 3 days in a row I'd walk out to find the outlet flap open. First time I figured maybe wind, second time I knew something was off. Third time, I caught the cable imprint in the dirt and a faint tire mark on the sidewalk. She was stealing my power. I didn't want to believe it okay, I did, but I needed proof. So I installed a discreet camera under the eaves above the outlet. That night, I sat in my garage with a thermos of coffee and a folding chair like I was on surveillance duty. At 11:30, headlights flicked down the block and eased to a stop near my curb. Sharon got out, popped open her trunk, and pulled the charging cable out like she was watering the lawn. She didn't even look around, just casually plugged into my outlet and walked back to her car. I couldn't stop laughing. She didn't even try to hide it. The next morning, I printed a still image from the footage and delivered it to her mailbox with a sticky note. You forgot to pay your electric bill again. That afternoon, she stormed up my driveway like she owned the pavement. You think this is funny, Vincent? She snapped, waving the paper like a flag. You left that outlet accessible. That makes it community power. Community power, I raised an eyebrow. Is that in the HOA handbook you wrote yourself? She crossed her arms, clearly trying to look intimidating in her tennis skirt. I reviewed the property line. That outlet is within 10 feet of public sidewalk. Technically, it's shared. Sharon, that's not how electricity works, she glared. Then maybe the HOA needs to review your non-compliant exterior modifications. I don't recall approving a surveillance camera. Ah, so that's how it was gonna be. You're threatening me because I caught you stealing power. I'm preserving standards, Vincent. And if you're smart, you'll remember your place in this neighborhood. I watched her stomp off, heels clicking like a metronome of entitlement. I'd dealt with wires and circuits my whole life. But this was a different kind of voltage. She just made it personal. By the following week, Sharon had escalated. It started with a letter from the HOA, delivered in a glossy envelope and printed on thick stock like it was an invitation to a gala. Inside, a formal notice about unauthorized electrical equipment on my exterior wall. No mention of cameras, of course, just vague language about non-conforming installations and visual disharmony with community aesthetics. The kicker. A fine, $200. I leaned against my kitchen counter, rereading the notice with a growing sense of awe. She didn't even try to hide the retaliation. This wasn't about the camera. This was about power, both literal and figurative. I didn't pay the fine. Instead, I filed an appeal and requested a hearing, which I knew would slow her down. That gave me time to prepare. I wasn't just an electrician. I was a licensed contractor with 10 years' experience, and I knew the local codes like the back of my hand. My camera was legal. My outlet was on private property, clearly marked on the plat map I'd gotten from the county 2 years ago when I installed a backup generator. I even had photos showing the outlet had been there before Sharon moved in. I made copies of everything and dropped them off at the HOA's attorney's office. Not their usual lawyer. Mind you, he quit 6 months ago after Sharon tried to strong-arm him into rewriting the bylaws to give her veto power over backyard furniture. The new guy, a fresh-faced associate from a downtown firm, gave me a tight-lipped nod when I handed him the folder. I think you'll want to look into this before you support any enforcement action, I said. There may be some liability issues if the HOA is condoning theft. He glanced through the documents. His expression shifted. I'll review it, he said carefully. That night, Sharon didn't show. No late-night pit stop, no headlights on the curb. I figured the lawyer had warned her. But the quiet didn't last. The next morning, I woke to find my lawn soaked. Not just wet, flooded. My sprinkler system had been tampered with, set to run for 4 hours straight starting at 3 a.m. I checked the controller. Someone had manually overridden the schedule. The panel was unlocked. I'd never left it that way. I installed a second camera, this time near the side gate where she must have entered. Sure enough, that night I caught her again sneaking in with a flashlight, fiddling with the panel like she was defusing a bomb. At this point, I was done playing defense. I rigged the outlet with a surge protector I'd custom built in my shop. It wasn't illegal, it was the same kind of system used in commercial buildings to protect circuits from overloads. But this one had a twist. If it detected a sudden, sustained draw from an unauthorized connection, it would trigger a rapid voltage spike short enough not to trip my breaker, but strong enough to fry sensitive electronics. Like, say, a Tesla battery control module. I tested it on an old inverter first. It smoked instantly. Perfect. Then I waited. 2 nights later, she was back. She didn't even hesitate, just popped the trunk, plugged in, and settled into her car with a travel mug and a smug little glance at my house. She didn't see me behind the blackout curtain in my living room, watching the voltage meter on my tablet. 5 minutes in, the surge kicked. The Tesla's lights flickered. Then the whole car went dead. No engine hum, no screen glow, just silence. Sharon stepped out, confused. She unplugged the cable and tried the door. Locked. The car wouldn't respond. I heard her muttering as she fumbled for her phone. Then she stomped back to her house. I didn't even have to wait long. The next morning, a tow truck arrived. It took 30 minutes to load the Tesla onto the flatbed. Sharon stood on the curb, arms crossed, shouting into her phone. I walked out with a cup of coffee and nodded. Car trouble, I asked. She spun around. You did this. You rigged that outlet. You mean the one on my private property? I took a sip. You really shouldn't plug into strange outlets. Could be dangerous. She looked like she wanted to throw something. Instead, she hissed, "You'll regret this." Seems like you already do. 2 days later, I got a visit from the county inspector. Sharon had filed a complaint claiming I'd built an unauthorized electrical modification that endangered public safety. When the inspector showed up, I handed him the same folder I'd given the HOA attorney: certified plans, permits, inspection records. He left within 20 minutes and actually apologized on the way out, but Sharon wasn't done. That Friday, I came home to find my mailbox ripped off its post. Not knocked over, removed. Clean break. No tire marks, no debris, just gone. I checked my footage. Nothing. She'd finally figured out where the new cameras were. But what she didn't know was that I'd installed a trail cam in my front planter, hidden behind the lavender bush. It caught her at 3 a.m. Wearing a ski mask and garden gloves, yanking the mailbox out and tossing it into the back of her SUV. I called the sheriff's department. By Monday, she was served with a notice of criminal mischief and petty theft. I handed over the footage, the timestamps, and the footage of her walking back into her garage afterward. The deputy raised an eyebrow. "That's the HOA president. She prefers community liaison," he chuckled. "She's gonna have a fun time explaining this in court." The HOA board met that Thursday. I showed up early and took a seat in the front row. The room was packed, more than 40 residents, some standing along the walls. Word had gotten around. The meeting started normally, then I raised my hand. "I'd like to present evidence of misconduct," I said. Sharon tried to shut me down, but the vice president, a retired judge named Mark, overrode her. "Let him speak." I played the footage, every clip, the charging. The tampering, the mailbox heist, the room erupted. People were whispering, shaking their heads. One guy near the back muttered, "That explains my water bill last month." Sharon tried to defend herself, claiming the footage was doctored. Mark shut her down again. "We'll be conducting a formal review of your actions. Effective immediately, your authority as president is suspended pending investigation." She stood up, red-faced, and shouted, "You're all ungrateful. I've done more for this neighborhood than any of you." Someone near the back yelled, "We didn't ask you to turn it into a dictatorship." She stormed out. That night, I got a knock at my door. It was Tony from 3 houses down. He'd always kept to himself, but now he looked fired up. "I've had enough of her," he said. "You taking her down gave the rest of us courage. We want a recall vote. You in?" I nodded. "Good," he said. "We're done letting her run this place like a private fiefdom, and just like that, the war turned into a revolution. The week after Sharon's suspension was like the first breath after drowning. Lawns went uninspected. Mailboxes stayed upright. Nobody got fined for leaving their trash bins out past noon. For the first time in years, the neighborhood felt like a community instead of a prison yard being patrolled by a clipboard with sunglasses. But I knew better than to think it was over. On Tuesday morning, I got a call from Mark, the HOA vice president. He asked if I could meet him at the community center for a quick conversation. When I arrived, he was already there, seated at the long oak table usually reserved for board meetings. He slid a manila folder across the table. "You need to see this," he said. "We've been going through the HOA's financials." Inside were copies of ledger entries, payments, invoices, and a few bank transfers. At first glance, it looked like routine maintenance expenses. But then I saw it. Multiple payments to a company called Greenfield Property Solutions. Landscaping, street light repairs, gate maintenance. Over 30 entries, all approved by Sharon. "Tell me that's not her husband's LLC," I said. "It is," Mark replied. "And it gets worse. The HOA account has been misappropriating funds. At least $12,000 were billed for services that were never performed." I didn't say anything. I was too busy flipping through the invoices and cross-checking the dates. One bill claimed a full irrigation system replacement at the community park. I'd walked by that park nearly every day. The irrigation system was an outdated mess that hadn't been touched in years. Mark rubbed his temple. "We're bringing in an auditor. But if you've got any more footage, documentation, anything that could support a criminal investigation, now would be the time." I didn't hesitate. "Give me 24 hours. That night, I went back through my archives. Sharon was meticulous in her pettiness, but careless in the way all bullies eventually become. I had footage of her meeting with contractors at odd hours, pulling envelopes from the HOA Dropbox herself, and even one clip where she handed a man what looked suspiciously like a cash-stuffed folder in the community center parking lot. The next morning, I delivered a thumb drive to Mark. By Friday, a detective from the county sheriff's Economic Crimes Division was asking questions. When the police cruisers finally rolled up to Sharon's house a week later quietly, just after sunrise, it was like the entire street held its breath. Two plainclothes officers knocked on her door while a third stood by the driveway. She opened the door wearing a silk robe and a look of confusion that quickly melted into panic as she saw the badges. They didn't cuff her. Not yet. But they escorted her into the back of the sedan and drove off with the kind of slow deliberateness that made sure everyone saw it. Tony from 3 doors down leaned on his rake and watched them disappear. "She always said she ran this place," he muttered. Guess she finally ran it into the ground. The HOA held an emergency meeting the next evening. Mark took the podium with a stack of papers and a voice that had clearly aged 10 years in the last 2 weeks. "There is now an active criminal investigation into former President Greenfield's financial conduct," he said. "We've also discovered that she signed several contracts without the board's knowledge or approval." He paused, then added, "One of those contracts obligated the HOA to pay a private security firm for neighborhood patrol services that were never rendered." Gasps rippled across the room. "Effective immediately," Mark continued, "all financial decisions will require a full board vote, and we're freezing further spending until the audit is complete." I stood up. "Are residents allowed to submit proposals for amending the bylaws?" Mark nodded. "Absolutely. In fact, we encourage it." I handed him a printed proposal with 3 items: mandatory third-party audits every year, term limits for board members, and a transparent review process for any new expenditures. Mark looked it over and smiled, tired, but genuine. "This is exactly what we need." Over the next 10 days, the neighborhood transformed, not because of any new leadership, but because people finally felt safe speaking up. Residents who had once been silent started organizing: gardeners, retirees, even the teenager who mowed lawns for extra cash. They all had stories and they all wanted change, but Sharon wasn't done. A week before the recall vote, I received a certified letter. Inside was a cease and desist order on Greenfield Property Solutions letterhead claiming I had slandered the company's operations and had caused irreparable harm to its reputation and business interests. I brought it straight to my attorney, Lisa, former city prosecutor, sharp as a tack. "This isn't just baseless," she said, scanning the letter. "It's a scare tactic. If they push it, we'll counterclaim for malicious prosecution." She helped me draft a response, attaching copies of the fraudulent invoices and reminding them that multiple state laws had likely been violated. We sent it off, certified and documented. They never replied. The day of the recall vote felt like a neighborhood block party. People brought lawn chairs, coolers, and homemade signs. The community center was packed tighter than a holiday potluck. Everyone got a ballot at the door, and the voting took less than an hour. When Mark stepped up to read the results, the room went silent. 74 in favor, 3 opposed. The recall passes. Applause erupted. A few people even cheered. Sharon, of course, wasn't present. She was under house arrest by then, pending charges of embezzlement, wire fraud, and obstruction. Her Tesla had been repossessed. Her husband's company dissolved within days. In the aftermath, things didn't just go back to normal, they got better. We replaced the entire board with a mix of residents, including Tony, a retired CPA who volunteered to oversee the HOA's finances for free. The bylaws were updated, the surveillance cameras were regulated, with clear community consent, and we even started a neighborhood newsletter, one Sharon would have called unnecessary clutter. A month later, I was out front rewiring the low-voltage lighting along my walkway when a kid from across the street rode up on his bike. "Hey, Mr. Meyers," he said. "My mom said you're the reason we don't have to hide our Halloween decorations this year." I laughed. "Tell your mom I said she can put up all the skeletons she wants." He grinned and rode off. As I gathered my tools, I looked down the block. Lawns weren't perfect. Mailboxes leaned a little. A few houses still needed a coat of paint, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like a neighborhood and not a showroom, and that was worth every volt. The first sign that the storm hadn't passed came in the form of a white envelope, hand-delivered to every house on the block. No logos, no postage, just the words, "Important Community Update," scrawled in all caps with a gray inkjet printer. I opened mine standing in the driveway, half expecting some leftover nonsense from Sharon's reign. Instead, it was a rambling manifesto. The letter claimed the recall vote was illegitimate, that the board had been hijacked by rogue elements, and that certain residents, me, obviously, had infiltrated leadership using intimidation and sabotage. It was unsigned, but the phrasing was unmistakable. Sharon never could resist a thesaurus and a misplaced legal term. I walked the letter straight to Mark. "I already got calls from 8 people, he said, folding his copy. "She's getting desperate. She's still under house arrest, isn't she?" He nodded. "Pending arraignment. But someone's helping her distribute this stuff. She's not walking door to door with an ankle monitor." We didn't have to wait long to find out who. The following morning, my neighbor Carla caught a familiar face on her doorbell cam. Sandra Whitmore. HOA secretary back when Sharon was still in charge. Quiet, always in the background but loyal to a fault. She was caught on camera slipping envelopes into mailboxes at dawn, hoodie pulled up, looking around like she was committing a heist. Mark decided to hold a special board meeting to address it. By then, over 20 residents had come forward with copies of the same letter. Sandra didn't show, but her son Gregory, a local paralegal, stood up during the meeting. "My mother's just trying to make sure the community knows what happened," he said. She believes Sharon was removed without due process. Mark looked tired but resolute. "Gregory, your mother signed the original complaint against Sharon. Her signature is on the recall petition. She was in the room," Gregory faltered. "She believes she was misled." I stood. "She helped distribute false financials. She knew the books were cooked. Whether she understood how deep it went or not, she was complicit." Gregory opened his mouth, but Mark cut him off. "The auditor's report will be public next week. We're not hiding anything. If your mother wants to contest the recall, she's welcome to file with the county. But intimidation campaigns through anonymous letters will not be tolerated." The room applauded. Not politely, loudly, decisively. Back at home, I started noticing small things again. My trash bin was tipped over 3 times in the same week. Someone poured something sticky into my mailbox, looked like soda. The side gate was left ajar after I had clearly latched it. I told myself it was coincidence. Then my garage keypad was reset. That's when I called Lisa again. She didn't bother with pleasantries. They're trying to provoke you into overreacting. Document everything. Don't engage. If it escalates, you know what to do. It did escalate. 2 nights later, I woke up to a faint humming, not mechanical, electrical. I followed it into the garage and flipped the light. My breaker box was open. Someone had rigged a jumper cable from my main panel to a portable inverter, clearly trying to draw power illegally. I didn't need to guess who'd set it up. The inverter was the same model Sharon's husband used for his landscaping equipment. And the serial number, still visible, still registered to Greenfield Property Solutions. I called the sheriff's department. This time, they brought a forensic technician. They dusted the panel, collected the inverter, took photos of the wiring. The deputy shook his head. Whoever did this wasn't just stealing power. This could have started a fire. I gave them everything: camera footage, timestamps, even the maintenance logs I kept for my electrical system. I didn't want to leave a single gap. That afternoon, I got a call from Detective Ramos, the same one handling Sharon's case. "We've added tampering with utility infrastructure to the charges," he said. "And we're investigating potential accomplices." I asked him if they had enough to bring anyone else in. "We're working with the DA," he said. "It's not just theft anymore. This is sabotage, and if we prove coordination, we're looking at conspiracy." The next week, the auditor released the findings. Sharon had funneled over $22,000 through dummy contracts. Half of it went to her husband's company, the other half. Prepaid gift cards, unexplained cash withdrawals, and a few payments to consultants with no names listed. Mark called an emergency vote. The board unanimously agreed to file a civil suit against Sharon and her husband to recover the funds. The motion passed without a single dissenting voice. I thought things might finally settle after that, but no, because Sharon made bail. She was released under strict conditions: no contact with HOA members, no involvement in community governance, and absolutely no tampering with private property. She lasted 4 days. On the 5th, a resident 2 streets over caught her on camera at 3 in the morning, pacing near his side yard with a flashlight. She claimed to be inspecting compliance. The footage made the evening news. That was the final nail. The DA filed an additional charge: violation of bail terms. Her bail was revoked. She was remanded that evening. Sandra, meanwhile, was charged as an accessory after the fact. She'd helped dispose of documents during the original investigation, shredded records found in her fireplace. Gregory tried to intervene, but his name showed up on 2 of the fake invoices. He was fired from his paralegal job before the ink dried on the indictment. When the trial started, I was called as a key witness. I testified about the electrical tampering, the forged fines, the power theft. The prosecutor used my footage, my logs, even my engineering notes from the surge protector as evidence of premeditation. Sharon's defense team tried to argue that she'd been acting in the community's best interest. But the jury didn't buy it. After 4 days of testimony, they returned a verdict: guilty on all counts. Sharon was sentenced to 4 years in a state facility, with restitution to the HOA, and court-ordered financial counseling. Her husband took a plea deal: 18 months probation, and full repayment of the funds his company had received. The neighborhood took a breath. We held a community potluck that weekend. No robes, no rules, just laughter, casseroles, and kids running through sprinklers. Mark stood beside the grill, flipping burgers. Carla handed out homemade lemonade. I fixed the solar lights along the community trail. Tony raised a plastic cup and said it best: "Here's to finally living in a neighborhood, not a dictatorship." People clinked cups, cheered, and went back to talking about normal things: the weather, the game, who'd trimmed their hedges too short. As I sat back in a lawn chair, watching the sun dip behind the rooftops, I realized I hadn't checked my cameras all week. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I needed to. Justice had done its job. and the outlet I capped it, sealed it, and turned it into a flower bed. It looked better with tulips anyway.